She was 32, the youngest female billionaire CEO in America. And she had built her company the hard way: blood, late nights, and a steel will that the press liked to call ice. Veronica Sterling sat in the quiet glow of first class, papers spread across her lap, eyes pruning themselves to the small black type of merger documents that could change the future of her empire. The night felt familiar, the hum of the engines, the soft clink of silverware in the galley, the thin blue light of the cabin screens. It should have been a sanctuary, a pocket of control in a life otherwise dictated by other people's expectations. Except for one thing, she was terrified of flying. Her father had died in a crash when she was 25, and that loss lived like a secret alarm inside her chest whenever the plane shuddered. He was nothing like the people who orbited her life. Marcus Johnson was quiet in a way that suggested he had learned how to listen before he spoke. He wore a simple button-down and jeans. His hands were those of a person who worked with precision and care. The worn leather book on his lap said Advanced Pediatric Surgery Techniques. He smiled when he introduced himself. Dr. Marcus Johnson, he said, with the easy confidence of a man who had spent his life being responsible for other people's hearts. She offered only her first name. Small talk was an economy she could not afford. Yet turbulence does strange things to carefully built walls. 30 minutes into the flight, the plane hit a patch of rough air. Veronica's knuckles went white. She could feel the old panic creep up, a small animal clawing at the back of her throat. Marcus noticed. He didn't smother her with sympathy. He asked quiet questions. "You okay?" And then, softer, "Want a distraction?" He began to tell her about a 6-year-old girl whose heart had defied the odds. How the child kept asking if she could play soccer after the surgery. How children needed promises, big ones, because hope is sometimes a prescription. His voice was steady and specific. It was not a story designed to charm or impress. It was the confession of someone who spent his days fixing what was breakable. Veronica found herself answering without planning to. The grip on the armrest loosened. Exhaustion, the kind that sits under a person like a second skin after 17-hour days, took over. She surprised herself by resting her head on his shoulder and falling asleep. When she woke, the plane was descending toward New York. Her hair was less perfect than when she boarded. Her cheeks felt softer than when she had last touched them. For a moment, panic and mortification collided inside her. A billionaire, caught asleep on a stranger's shoulder. The image felt fragile and dangerous. He had draped his jacket over her without waking her. And he was smiling, calm, as if what had happened were the most ordinary human thing in the world. "Thank you," she said, quieter than she expected. Gratitude slipped through the armor. "You look like you needed the rest," Marcus replied. He told her his ride had fallen through. She offered hers. Perhaps it was the late hour. Perhaps it was the strange permission that travel gives to people who have never met. But they walked through the terminal side by side. And for the first time in a long while, Veronica felt the sting of being seen not as a headline, not as a brand, but as a person. They sat in the back of her car and talked. He told her about the hospital, about families who watched the monitors with prayer and disbelief, about a child's crayon drawing he kept in his scrubs. She told him about the empire, about a boardroom that expected perfection, about the heavy inheritance of a name. They traded assumptions about each other and found them wanting. He confessed the small humiliations of being judged in public. She confessed how she had perfected performance because she believed it was safer than being vulnerable. "Would you like coffee sometime?" he asked as they parted. Not a date, he clarified, just coffee. She said yes. 3 days later, she sat in a small Brooklyn cafe, conspicuous in her tailored suit among students and artists, feeling out of place and, oddly, alive. Marcus arrived with a child's drawing tucked under his arm. "She wants to play soccer," he said, setting the paper between them. Veronica looked at the crude, joyful lines and felt the world tilt. For the first time since she could remember, she wanted something that had nothing to do with a quarterly report. They talked for hours. They talked about things that aren't allowed in boardrooms, childhood promises, small dreams abandoned for safety, the strange loneliness that success can cultivate. The world, however, is rarely content to let two people decide quietly who they will be. Photos leaked. The tabloid circled. Headlines declared a scandal where there was only a private moment. Her phone flooded with messages that were not all kind. His hospital called. Her board called. People who loved gossip and the neat geometry of narrative tried to redraw the story to their liking. The woman who could buy whole cities and the man who stitched hearts back together. The comments and the conversations assumed motives and assigned scripts. Even those who meant well sometimes wondered aloud whether this would compromise professional reputations or derail careers. It would have been easy to retreat, to choose the predictable safety of silence. But the rightness of a life is not decided by the loudness of its critics. Marcus sat beside her one evening, and when she asked what kept him going through long nights and petty slights, he answered with a calm she had come to trust. I take care of the small miracles. If people are angry about it, I'll keep doing my work. If people are wrong about us, then let them be wrong. I'm not willing to shape my life out of other people's fear. Veronica had spent a lifetime designing her life to avoid mistakes. She had constructed a perimeter of control so precise, it left little room for softness. But love, when it arrives, does not negotiate by the terms of spreadsheets or PR policies. It arranges itself in the margins, a jacket placed like a blanket, a crayon drawing passed across a cafe table, two hands held across a dim restaurant. The question became not whether it was safe, but whether it was true. They did not shout their lives from rooftops, but they did not hide them either. They met in small ways, private dinners in unremarkable restaurants, careful lunches between meetings, long weekend walks where conversation replaced phone screens. When the media turned their privacy into gossip, they faced the consequences as partners. Awards complained about optics. Influencers debated motives. Strangers wrote reviews of their choices as if they were judging a play. Marcus noticed the shift in colleagues' behavior. Veronica noticed the thin attempts to control the narrative of her life. They both faced family and institution-level pressure to retreat, to return to the comfortable illusion that personal life could be neatly partitioned away from professional one. Yet under the spotlight, something unexpected happened. Messages arrived from unexpected corners. Young women told Veronica that seeing someone like her choose love felt like permission. Parents whose children had been saved by Marcus's hand-sent notes of gratitude and support. Within the noise of outrage and curiosity, there were messages that cut through. Small testament to the fact that human lives refuse to fit inside headlines. One evening, sitting across from each other with the city spread like a scatter of lights below, Veronica finally said aloud what she had been thinking for weeks. What if I'm tired of hiding? She asked. What if I choose us, even if it makes some people uncomfortable? Marcus squeezed her hand and replied, then we keep choosing each other. We do the work. We stay honest with ourselves. If the world doesn't understand, that's a reflection of what the world is, not what we are. They learned that courage shows in small acts almost as much as in grand gestures. Defending a partner in a tense boardroom, answering a concerned call from a hospital administrator, showing up for the ordinary parts of life. They learned how prejudice could wound, but how the quiet, steady presence of another person could heal. They learned to accept that love is not a shield against criticism, but it is a reason to fight for the life you want. This story is not about fairy tale endings or the idea that love solves everything. There are consequences they had to manage, logistics and reputations and exiled assumptions. But it is about the decision to choose connection over image, to let vulnerability be a strength rather than a liability. Veronica found that success measured in spreadsheets had taught her many things: discipline, strategy, the ability to endure, but it had not taught her how to be held. Marcus taught her that people can be both strong and tender, brilliant and humane. Together, they both found a version of themselves that was larger than the parts the world had once insisted on naming. So here is the question I want to leave you with. If you were in Veronica's shoes with power, fear, and a public that expects you to be flawless, would you risk being truly visible for the chance to be truly loved? And if you were in Marcus's shoes, who already carried the weight of prejudice in quiet, daily ways, would you let the world's assumptions define the love you deserve? Tell me where you stand. Share your thoughts below. Because in the end, this is not just their story. It's a small mirror for all of us about what it looks like to choose courage in a world that rushes to judgment. If this moved you, share it. If it challenged you, tell us why. And remember, real bravery is often quiet. And sometimes it simply looks like resting your head on a stranger's shoulder and deciding to stay.